Okay, everybody, this is Dr. Joseph P. Farrell, and it is Thursday, August 16th, 2012. I want to begin with a couple of announcements and then move to today's news. It's the year of the apocalypse. Hasn't happened yet, but like I say, they're working awfully hard on it. All right. Uh, the announcement is, first of all, Dr. DeHart and I just received the proofs in email of the transhumanism book. We've got all the corrections that we could catch made, and they're back at the publisher. And that will go off to the printer, I would imagine, I would hope, within the next couple of weeks. So it's going to be, I would guess, a month to 2 months before the transhumanism book is available. And again, I want to kind of clue everybody, in this book, we're not taking a very judgmental approach to things. That said, we are very, very skeptical of a lot of developments in the transhumanism field. But the way we kind of strategize the book, I think you'll see that what we suspect is going on in transhumanism, given the subtitle, An Alchemical Grimoire, is a lot to do with alchemy. So anyway, that's the first announcement. The second announcement is I want to thank everybody who have been sending donations, memberships, prayers, and also I wanted to thank all of you. A lot of you are sending me articles and suggestions in emails, bringing things to my attention, and I want to thank you for that, because increasingly what is happening is a lot of you will send me the same article, or I'll find an article and you all send me the same article. So it gives me kind of a bead on where you're at and where I need to be at, the things that concern you and everything. So I appreciate that a lot. And I wanted to make sure I thanked everybody for that, for the donations, for the memberships, because a lot of this work wouldn't be getting done, quite frankly, without you. So I appreciate it. Now, on to the news today. I went to the grocery store. I came back just now from the grocery store. And I woke up this morning pretty determined that I was going to do this news and views on the Julian Assange WikiLeaks situation. As most of you know, he's been holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London and been asking the Ecuadorian government to give him political asylum. So I was going to do this today anyway. So I go to the grocery store, I buy my Mr. Pibb, I buy my Cheetos, my junk food basically that I munch on while I'm sitting here in the office working. On the way back, I had my radio tuned to the local talk radio station, and they just made an announcement. The British Foreign Secretary, or British Foreign Minister, just made an announcement that Ecuador had indeed formally granted Julian Assange political asylum. All right, now, most of you who have been following my website know that I have not said anything thus far on Julian Assange or WikiLeaks. Number one, because it's a story that for some reason didn't grab me until today. All right. And a lot of you have been following that story. I'm not passing any opinion or judgment on Julian Assange or WikiLeaks or what he's been up to in his life one way or the other. I don't know. But let's just recall that here we have an article that appeared on the Huffington Post back in the year 2010, where the Democratic commentator on faux news, Bob Beckel, called for Julian Assange to be illegally killed because of his leaks and so on. Another article, and I'm going to link all these on the website, about former Arkansas governor and former Republican presidential candidate Mike Huckabee, stating that Assange should be executed. Former Governor Sarah Palin also came out and said that Assange should be hunted down like Osama bin Laden. So in other words, and I'm raising these points just to show that on the political left and the political right, in this country at any rate, the media has been portraying Assange in the worst possible light. Whether it's true or not, I don't know. I don't care, because the real story here today is the fact that Ecuador granted Mr. Assange political asylum. Now, I happen to think that this is probably the correct thing to do, because I suspect that the whole extradition to Sweden thing was really just to get him to Sweden so that he could in turn be re-extradited from Sweden to the United States to stand trial for treason. And this is the strange thing. A lot of these politicos, talking heads in the American media, are saying that Mr. Assange is guilty of treason under U.S. law. Well, the problem is you've got to be a citizen of the United States to commit treason against American law. And as far as I know, maybe he is, maybe he isn't a citizen, kind of like a president that we all know. But anyway, the problem is it's kind of hard to commit treason when you're from the Commonwealth of Australia and a subject of the British Crown rather than an American citizen. But anyway, that's, who's gonna quibbling? So anyway, last night, a bunch of you, everybody from George Ann Hughes to Facebook friends to website members, sent me an article, linked an article to me from RTTV. And this is really interesting because RTTV is reporting that the Ecuadorian embassy in London, as well as the Ecuadorian foreign minister, were handed an aide de memoire from the British government stating that under their 1987 Diplomatic and Consular Premises Act, the UK, that act allows United Kingdom forces to actually go in to the Ecuadorian embassy, arrest Mr. Assange, take physical custody of him, and remove him from the embassy. Now, needless to say, I don't care what UK law is, but as far as I remember, the idea of an embassy was that it was the sovereign territory of the nation holding the embassy. And therefore, to invade that territory without that country's permission was quite literally stepping across the border, and formally it used to be considered an act of war. Okay? So the Ecuadorian foreign minister, Mr. Ricardo Patino, stated that that would constitute, quote unquote, a flagrant violation of Article 22 of the Vienna Convention. And he also went on to state that it would force Ecuador to respond. Now, while all of this has been going on, RTTV is reporting that the British have begun to move police units around the Ecuadorian embassy, and the United States has now said that if Ecuador grants Assange asylum, which it has now done in the last few minutes, that it would be forced to consider sanctions against Ecuador. Now, what really gets me here, folks, and this is what I really wanted to talk about, we're dealing now with a geopolitical crisis because then Prime Minister Vladimir Putin back in 2010 stated on the record that as far as he was concerned, the whole Assange case was being handled in a very undemocratic fashion. All right. So in other words, Russia weighed in on the side of Julian Assange. All right. China has said something similar. The Chinese leader Hu Jintao has said similar things. All right. Now, this puts Ecuador's response to all of this in a very interesting situation because the British formally delivered this note stating to Ecuador that they had the authority under British law to go into the Ecuadorian embassy, arrest Mr. Assange, and physically remove him from the embassy premises. All right. Now, that was yesterday or the day before that this happened. So today, Ecuador, in other words, has responded and told the British, and I gotta love Ecuador for this, standing up to Great Britain. Britain is still a very powerful country, obviously. Ecuador isn't, all right? So Ecuador basically has said, in your face to the British Foreign Secretary, we're granting him asylum. And the Foreign Secretary, in his press conference just today, the British Foreign Secretary stated that Mr. Assange will not be allowed to leave the United Kingdom. So in other words, he may be stuck there for years if the British don't go in to the embassy and physically remove him. All right. Now, Ecuador, in response to the American threats about sanctions and so on, has stated, its foreign minister, Ricardo Patino, has stated that Ecuador would bring its case before the Organization of American States and the Organization of Latin American States as a violation of its sovereignty. All right. Now, folks, what this is shaping up to be is, I think, a very interesting thing, because the way I'm looking at it, the Ecuadorian Foreign Ministry has assessed the situation, number one, and they have basically said we cannot afford, whether Assange has a legitimate case or not, we cannot afford as a sovereign nation to allow Great Britain and the United States to run roughshod over the traditions of international diplomacy that have been established over the last 200 years. All right? That's the first thing I think that they have been thinking. The second thing I think is even more interesting. By going to the Organization of American States, they're signaling something, and it's a very, very powerful message. I've been blogging and talking in these news and views on the website a lot about this geopolitical realignment that is taking place, and a lot of it is being driven by the alienation that former allies of the United States, and for that matter the United Kingdom, have been expressing in the wake of 9/11 and this insane explosion, this insane Western power grab all throughout the world, and an increasing erosion of the civil liberties of those two nations that have traditionally championed those liberties at home. All right? And I think what we're seeing now is Ecuador has assessed the situation and looked at it very carefully and seen that, all right, if these two Western nations decide to do this, they have already alienated Brazil to a great extent. Brazil is part of the BRICS nations. It is moving more and more in this area of bilateral agreements between Brazil and China, Brazil and Russia, and the same with the other great South American power, which would be Argentina. All right. Now, the thing here is Ecuador, I think, has assessed the situation in the following way. If the West does these things, if they make good on their threats, then what they're going to do is they're going to turn to China and Russia. And China and Russia will be there. Trust me. They will be there with those agreements. The United States can impose all the trade sanctions it wishes. China will step in and fill the vacuum for consumer goods. Russia may step in and fill the vacuum for energy. And there's always, of course, the other big energy producer that is a thorn in the West side, and that's Venezuela with Hugo Chavez. Now, I think this is the way that Ecuador is reading the situation. If that's the case, Ecuador has shown a lot of geopolitical pluck. So we're going to see where all of this goes. But I think the Assange story has, in the last 2 to 3 days, it's now grown and morphed into something very different. It's now a geopolitical football that's now going to be kicked around between the West, Russia and China, and South America. All right, and it's interesting now that Ecuador has positioned itself very, very cannily to be the spokesman for traditional values, for human rights, for the rule of law and international diplomacy, and painted the West in a very, very bad light. It's very, very ingenious, I think. So this is a story to watch, folks. That's kind of my take on it. I want to thank you again for sending me all these articles, and I'll be linking some of the articles I referred to at the beginning of this on the website in this news and views. See you on the flip side, everybody. God bless.